Hello, today I'm going to discuss the topic of gendered embodiment. I'm going to explore why and how gendering happens, some misconceptions, and even pose a few questions about why gender even exists. So to begin, I'm going to touch base on gender versus sex. Sex is your reproductive organs. It is your genitalia, what you were born with, male versus female, and those who are intersex and whatnot, but it is your genitalia. And then when we take a look at gender, it is the social and cultural differences between males and females. So I want you to think of those two things. Your genitalia, you didn't choose it. You were born with it. It is factual. There is physical evidence and proof of your sex. Now, when we look at gender, again, it is socially constructed, so it is learned. It is not inherent. You weren't born just liking pink and ballet and automatically believing that you had to be sensitive and submissive as a female. No, that is something that was learned. Now, this gendering begins before a child even takes their first breath. Often, someone will find out they're pregnant, can't wait to find out the sex, and then they paint the nursery the color that corresponds with that sex, the gendered color. So, pink for female and blue for a male. Now, this gendering of children continues after that first breath. It happens in school, their social life, at home, in sports, anything and everything. What they're supposed to like and wear, it continues. So it becomes this natural thing. It becomes normal. And we don't think much of it until we're older or meet someone who falls outside of our gender spectrum. And Karen Martin describes gender as a performance. It is a persona. It is this role that we fall into. And we fall so deeply into that role that we begin to embody that gender. And again, we continue that cycle. Now, that's where the whole misconception of sex equals gender happens. Because from even before we're born, it is taught and conditioned that we're supposed to like certain things and act a certain way. You can kind of see the beginning of sexism in this, because females are learned that they are supposed to be soft and gentle and submissive, where males are supposed to be intense and dominant and strong, muscular, right? So we associate these things with being a female or a male, which is interesting, and I want you to take into consideration this. So just as our reproductive functions are fact, we are born with them. We are also born with our body type. So some people are naturally more muscular and others aren't. Some people have a thinner frame. So why is it that we associate one body type with emulating what it is to be female or male? Before a child is even born, there are these expectations and standards of what they are supposed to be like. So, when someone falls outside of these normalized gender roles, it's frowned upon, and it's actually considered to be an illness. So I want you to take that fully into consideration, let that really sink in, that someone who likes things that are associated with the opposite sex is considered to be ill. So people are diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It's an issue with emotional and psychological identity, which leads me into the misconception of those who are transgendered. Now, I myself used to believe this too, but a massive misconception is that those who are transgender want to be the opposite sex. So they want to have sexual reassignment surgery. They want to have different genitalia. But in reality, being transgender actually just means that someone personally identifies more with the gender associated with the opposite sex. So they're not identifying necessarily with the reproductive function of the opposite sex. They're identifying with the gender. So things that are potentially masculine or feminine, they are identifying with that. They are identifying with the things that the opposite sex is supposed to like. So we're turning that into an illness. We are so uncomfortable with the idea of being outside of gender roles that we are calling it an illness. So much so that to be recognized as transgender, you must seek medical attention. You must undergo psychological assessments to be labeled as transgender, to identify and be recognized as transgender. So you must seek medical attention if you fall into the opposite gender role more than the one that is associated with your sex. So something we learn, not something we are born with. And that's where the whole issue of passing also comes into play with these gendered bodies of those who are transgendered, and why passing has become so important is to avoid the harassment and punishment and repercussions that happens. We can look at the work of Dean Spade, who talks about wanting to be able to express variant gender identities without punishment. So wanting to like the things they like and dress the way they want to dress without punishment. So when we look at gender, I hope that we can begin to take into consideration that it might be a spectrum and not necessarily just one extreme or the other. So again, gender is learned, is not inherent. Sex is biological. And yes, there are people who are transgender that want to change their sex and actually identify completely as the opposite sex, maybe not even gender-wise, but that's a whole different thing. And we have to stop associating the two. And before you frown upon someone for falling into the other gender role or the opposite gender role, take into consideration that it was socially constructed. I'm Michaela Renfro, and I hope I have informed you a little bit on gendered embodiment. Thank you.